Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation right here, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. On this Thursday evening, kind of a little bit of a big news day. Couple of things that are happening, people leaving the administration, Trump admitting he's a criminal, etc., etc. Fun times. We're going to talk about that. We've got quite a few stories, actually, on that admission, which is really interesting, including some of the fun defenses, but also a Fox News host going after Trump. And you're going to be surprised who that is. Very interesting. And, of course, going after Trump as much as a Fox News host can go after Trump. Then we have the contempt vote against William Barr. We're going to talk about that as well. Bernie Sanders versus J.P. Morgan Chase. Awesome. But then, of course, we're going to start out by some of the most interesting news of the day. And I say that ironically. Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Okay. Get ready for it. Get ready for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Down goes Sarah Sanders. She is done. Press Secretary Huckabee Sanders is now out at the White House, according to a tweet from President Trump. Now, let me read you the tweet here. He said, after 3.5 years, our wonderful Sarah Huckabee Sanders will be leaving the White House at the end of the month, so that's at the end of June, and going home to the great state of Arkansas. She's a very special person with extraordinary talents, like, for example, lying, who has done an incredible job. I hope she decides to run for governor of Arkansas. She would be fantastic. Sarah, thank you for a job well done. Okay, so look, that's all the information that we have right now on Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So we're going to go into some fun little speculation. Okay, so for one, a lot of you might be surprised that she was even there for that long. Why? It's because she was not giving any press briefings anymore. No press briefings. That's it. Like every once in a while, she'll come out and she'll say something, but she never talks to the press. Why is she even there? What's the point of having her, right? Now the question is, of course, why she left. Was it her decision? Did she know that she was going to leave? Because, I mean, there have been a lot of stories where people who ended up leaving the administration found out they got fired via tweet. Is this that situation? I don't necessarily know. And of course, the other question, of course, is who's going to replace her if she's going to have a replacement? And so the reason that I say that is that Trump before has remarked, I don't need a press secretary. I'm my own press secretary, and I will be so much more better than anyone else. And besides, do you really need a press secretary if you never talk to the press anyway? Again, they don't have press briefings. Donald Trump refers to the press as the enemy of the people. Do they really need a replacement? Are they actually going to hire anyone else? It wouldn't be a surprise if he let that spot vacant, as there are actually a lot of vacant spots in the Trump administration when it comes to major cabinet members. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that he just leaves the whole thing open and doesn't actually hire anyone to replace Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Again, what's the point? Again, my speculation, of course, as to whether or not she get fired or not. I guess we're gonna have to see. I don't really know. And there's not a lot of information, but I'm sure we'll be able to see that in the next couple of days. But if you're a fan of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, sorry, but she's gone. She's going back to Arkansas, and she ain't coming back. I'll leave it at that. I was going to say some worse things, but you don't, no, we'll leave it at that. Okay. Anyway, so let's go into fun stuff. Okay. Now, President Trump continues to freak out about the possibility of being impeached for criminal behavior. What criminal behavior? Well, that would be obstruction of justice as well as doing campaign finance violations. Now, in some tweets, he quoted a constitutional lawyer as saying Congress would be unable to impeach him as they would, quote, be putting themselves above the law. That's very interesting. I'm going to tell you who that person is that he's quoting, but first, let's get to the tweet. And this was about Michael Flynn. He said, General Michael Flynn, the 33-year war hero who has served with distinction, has not retained a good lawyer. He's retained a great lawyer, Sidney Powell. Best wishes and good luck to them both, according to Mr. Trump. Okay, so now the reason that's important is that he's talking about an open case right now. And he goes on with a couple of subsequent tweets here. Now, the thing is that since this is an open case, this was an investigation, why is he chiming in on this? He's not supposed to be. That would be obstruction of justice. But how that relates to impeachment, of course, is that, well, apparently, this quote from Alan Dershowitz that he quotes later on in that tweet thread said, Congress is unable to impeach me. Well, that's weird. Now, they said that Congress can't impeach because it would be putting themselves above the law, which is, I think, pretty hilarious as Republicans impeach Bill Clinton. Now, let me ask you, was that above the law? Was Congress putting themselves above the law when they impeached Bill Clinton with the Republicans? Of course not. But like I said, this is Alan Dershowitz, and he wrote, Congress cannot impeach President Trump, did nothing wrong, because if they did, they would be putting themselves above the law. The Constitution provides criteria for impeachment: treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors. Unless there is compelling evidence, impeachment is not constitutionally permissible. Now, I love how he thinks, oh, no, I'm a constitutional scholar, so obviously I know that as long as Republicans are leading impeachment, that's okay. That is permissible by the law. But when Democrats are, for actual crimes, then no, they are not able to impeach because he's a member of my team. Again, Alan Dershowitz, right? Defending Donald Trump consistently. Now, somebody go back to the 1990s and tell Newt Gingrich and Ken Starr that, hey, turns out you're being above the law, and you need to stop that. Now, Trump, of course, instructed Michael Cohen to make hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal. That's what this whole thing's about. Those are campaign finance violations. That's what his crimes are. And he has also broken the emoluments clause. And not only that, but he did obstruction of justice during the Mueller probe. And he appears to be attempting to do more obstruction of justice when it comes to Michael Flynn, talking about his lawyers. And apparently, according to The Independent, this is where it's kind of related, Mr. Trump's comments triggered immediate claims that the president's team may be attempting to interfere in the trial of Mr. Flynn. Coming a week after the release of an audio recording of the president's lawyer, John Dowd, requesting a heads up about Mr. Flynn's interactions with the Robert Mueller investigation. Oops. Uh-oh. Now, Brian Klass, a political scientist at University College London, said Mr. Trump's tweet, combined with the audio recording of Dowd's call with Flynn, is a blatant signal to Flynn and could amount to obstruction of justice. Now, on Wednesday, news came out that Flynn had hired Sidney Powell, right? Now, Sidney Powell, that is his new lawyer, is a fierce critic of Mr. Mueller's investigation and a conservative commentator who frequently appears on Fox News. So Trump says, oh, no, that's a great lawyer. That's exactly the kind of person you want. Hint, hint, if you're going to, of course, fight the charges against you. Whereas there is a lot of speculation that Flynn will retract his guilty plea and that he will fight this. Since, of course, Donald Trump got away with everything. And Donald Trump, of course, is still a fan of Mr. Flynn. Here we go. Now, around the same time, the Justice Department released a transcript of a phone call from Mr. Dowd to Rob Kellner, Mr. Flynn's lawyer, in which Dowd sought information about his Flynn's discussion with Mueller. So, look, he can't help himself, right? Here we go. He's trying to obstruct justice. I mean, why not? He's getting away with it. I mean, Mueller punted this whole thing to Congress, and Nancy Pelosi is not going to do anything about it. Now, again, Trump flips out about impeachment, but in reality, the House is not even getting near impeachment, thanks to the weak Democrats, spineless Democrats. So now he's just going to continue with his obstruction to help out his friend Michael Flynn, and as well as all of his other friends who decided not to rat him out. They didn't become rats. They stayed loyal, unlike Michael Cohen. It is incredibly hypocritical of both Dershowitz as well as Republicans to say that we cannot impeach Trump over his actual crimes when they impeached Clinton over not doing crimes. As usual, the hypocrisy knows no bounds, and as for the Democrats, they will continue to allow Trump to get away with his crimes because they're weak and spineless. That sucks. Okay. Moving on. Now, President Trump recently admitted that he would violate the law if it would give him a political advantage in the upcoming election. Now, this was during an interview with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos. Trump said that he would gladly accept information from a foreign government on his opponents if it was offered, and that he would probably not tell the FBI. Now, here's some of that video. Let's take a look.
Your campaign this time around, if foreigners, if Russia, if China, if someone else offers you information on an opponent, should they accept it or should they call the FBI?
I think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening. If somebody called from a country, Norway, we have information on your opponent. Oh, I think I'd want to hear it.
You want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it. If I thought there was something wrong, I'd go maybe to the FBI if I thought there was something wrong. But when somebody comes up with Oppo research, right? They come up with Oppo research. Oh, let's call the FBI. The FBI doesn't have enough agents to take care of it. But you go and talk honestly to congressmen. They all do it. They always have. And that's the way it is. It's called Oppo research.
It's called Oppo research. No. You know what it's called? When you take opposition research from a foreign government, it's called illegal. It's called a crime. And there it is. Here's Trump saying, commit a crime? Yes. If it gives me an advantage, of course. Of course I will. No, you cannot use opposition research that has been funded and conducted by another country. Why? Because it's a campaign finance violation. And there are strict rules about taking campaign, or any type of sort of campaign contribution from a foreign government. This is wild because we just had an investigation into whether or not Donald Trump did this exact sort of thing back in 2016. And then here he is. He's rubbing it in your face. He's admitting, yes, of course. Oh, I'd do it. Yeah, I'll go. Collusion, of course. I'd love to. I'd absolutely work with the foreign government if they came to me with research, and maybe I would tell the FBI, but maybe I wouldn't. Unless, of course, I thought that there might be something wrong. Well, really, seriously. Then, of course, he goes on to say, I've seen a lot of things over my whole life. I don't think in my whole life I've ever called the FBI. You don't call the FBI. This is somebody who says, we have information on your opponent. Oh, let me call the FBI. Life doesn't work that way. Really? Well, not if you're a criminal, I guess. Look, Donald Trump is absolutely fine with taking opposition research from the Russians, probably the Chinese, maybe the Israelis. It doesn't matter where it comes from as long as it gives him an advantage. Because he's going to do whatever the hell he wants as long as it helps him win. And the reason is because he always gets away with it. He is never, ever held accountable. He's gotten away with campaign finance violations, obstruction of justice, and who knows what else. Possible money laundering, bribery. Who knows how long the list of crimes Donald Trump is guilty of committing. Nancy Pelosi, it's time to impeach. You know why? It's because he's rubbing your face in it. That's the message. I can do whatever I want. I am above the law. And yes, I would absolutely do it again. When are you going to stand up? When are you going to impeach this criminal? I await your answer. Okay. Moving on. A lot of fallout from this one. Okay. Now, on Wednesday, President Trump admitted to being open to getting opposition research on his opponents that would be funded by and conducted by a foreign government. Now, that is, of course, illegal, wildly illegal, as you cannot take campaign contributions from a foreign government. Now, that led, of course, to Fox host Brian Kilmeade accidentally making a pretty good point against it. Let's take a look.
Well, put it this way, nothing's free in this world. You don't want a foreign government or a foreign entity giving you information because they're going to want something back. And if anybody knows that, it's the president, because there is no free lunch. If someone gives you information, then they're going to want influence. I think the president's got to clarify that. That's why I'm glad he's coming on tomorrow, because he opened himself wide up to attacks. And I think you agree. If China does say, hey, President Trump, I got information on Pete Buttigieg, because we know at South Bend you can get up to a lot of no good. There's a lot of things going on there. The president should say, hey, keep it. I got this, right, because I don't want to owe China or Russia something in return.
Well, think about it.
Oh, my God. Brian Kilmeade just made a good point. Write this one down for the record book, man, because I actually agree with Brian Kilmeade for the most part. For the most part, of course. But I love how he says, president needs to clarify, of course. Because he did not just say what I thought he said, and that taking opposition research, because, hey, there's no free lunch. He's absolutely right on that one. Now, ironically, he also makes the case against all political funding without even noticing it. Now, I mean, again, if China wants to give information that helps a certain candidate win, whether it be Republican, Democrat, whatever, right, then they're going to want something in return. Or else, why would you be helping that candidate win? I mean, look, that's the whole point of lobbying. That's the whole point of campaign contributions, in order to get something back. Whether it be a foreign government, whether it be a lobbyist, or anything, right? Now, but Jeff, what about if you give $5 to Bernie Sanders? Well, yes, that means my $5, I want to influence Bernie Sanders to do the stuff that will help me and my family and this country. Things like Medicare for all, things like a living wage, etc. Yes, that is influence, but it's different because, and this is why it's different, right? If you get small donors, lots of small donors, then you are you're asking your representative to represent you, to represent people. If you're a giant corporation and you give $5 million to a candidate, well, that $5 million is basically going to outweigh that $5, and that big corporation is going to influence that politician far more than the person who gives $5. That's why I'm in favor of not just small contributions, but actually in favor of getting rid of all political contributions. I'll explain that. But first, we need to have, look, as far as the influence goes, this is why we have, from foreign governments, it's why we have a ban on foreign donations, right? And why we should have a ban on all contributions. Now, you might be asking, but well, now wait a minute. How are our politicians going to actually raise money then? Simple. Public financing of elections. That's it. And, by the way, the TV networks, I believe all TV networks should be required by law to give candidates equal airtime for free. Oh my God, oh no! Now that, of course, will make people's heads explode, as well as anybody who takes corporate money or spends corporate money. But if you're going to ban foreign money from elections, which we have because of influence, right? Then you should ban all private money from elections for the same reason. Why is it okay for wealthy Americans and corporations to have an outsized influence in our elections? It's not. It's not okay. And that's why I think Brian inadvertently makes a fantastic point, because he says there is no free lunch. He says you don't want somebody giving you information or a campaign contribution, because that's what it is, because you're going to want something back. Well, thank you for making such a great, obvious, albeit accidental point. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a break here. We'll come back, take some comments, etc., and then get into the ridiculous defense of Trump doing this. You're going to love that story. All right. We'll be right back around the nation. welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Got some fun comments here. Let's see. We have non-member comments. Ocean Drive Limited says ban the foreign lobby groups in Washington. They do all the damage. Not just that, but ban all the lobbying groups in Washington. That's it. No money in politics. Get it all out. Get it all out. End the corruption. Weary Pirates says publicly funded election equals 2-month campaign cycles. Oh, whisper of a dream. Oh, that would be so fantastically awesome. Indian Job says Trump could shoot an unarmed child in broad daylight, and Republicans and corporate Democrats would sweep up under the rug. Christ almighty. Agreed. And Kara Jad asks, why exactly is it up to Pelosi to bring impeachment? That's a good question. Because Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House. She's the only one that has the power to okay an impeachment proceedings, to bring the articles of impeachment to the floor for a vote. She has the power. She also has the power to, of course, whip Democrats who may be unsure of voting for impeachment to try to get that around. She's supposed to be the leader here, and if she's not going to lead, then what's she doing there? What's the point? So all great comments here. Then we also have some super chats. Sarge Tech says the Huckabeast of Tanagra is leaving the White House. Shaka. When the walls fell. I appreciate a good Star Trek The Next Generation reference. Peril 77 says, I am the law. Okay, interesting. The Glass Sword says Trump would be the guy hacking in online games. It's not like Trump doesn't, I don't know, cheat at golf. I mean, he does all the time. It's been documented that he literally cheats at golf. It's hilarious. And also super, super sad. So thank you for those super chats in the comments. Before we get back into the stories, I want to thank some patrons. Ron Richardson, Judith Ferraris, Susan Larson, Greg Resnick, Randall Asado, Robert Beltran, and Tina Carl. So thank you to all those patrons. Patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you can support us and keep independent progressive media alive. Again, I'm starting to think, because you guys know YouTube was messed up a couple of days ago, right? I'm beginning to think that's because they messed around with their algorithm. And ever since then, our views have been a lot lower than they were previously. So I wonder if they messed around with the suggested feed, once again, the recommendations. And so we are, of course, again, hurt by YouTube changes. So if now, or if there's ever a time to sign up to support your favorite creators on YouTube, now would be the time. Patreon.com/TYTNation. Okay. Just had to throw that in there because I feel it's important. Okay. Anyway, let's move on to Rick Santorum and his ridiculous defense of Donald Trump. Okay. Let me cue up the video here. All right. Now, Rick Santorum is about one of the most shameless defenders of Donald Trump alongside Lindsey Graham. Now, he's going to show that on CNN by defending Donald Trump's admission that he's willing to take foreign dirt on his political opponents if that gives him an advantage in the election. Let's take a look.
To solicitation of all those emails.
Laura, you're introducing a bunch of facts that George Stephanopoulos never said. George Stephanopoulos didn't ask him whether he was soliciting. He said if someone came to you. So the president wasn't answering questions about soliciting information. He was saying if someone came to you and said, hey, I have some dirt, and he was talking more colloquially. And again, I think the president's word is often are imprecise and not necessarily, that's why I think he didn't want to be interviewed with Bob Mueller, is that he tends to sort of ramble and talk about things more loosely. And I think he was talking more of a general political context that we get opposition research all the time. When you get opposition research in a campaign, you don't call the FBI. I mean, I got folks who threw information at me in all of my campaigns, and no, I never called the FBI.
Right, but did you get it from Russia or Norway?
If I knew that information was coming from a foreign source, sure, I would call the FBI.
Okay, but that's not what the president said. He didn't say
yes. He said he would.
Exactly. And
he said he would do more.
And more than that, Rick.
No, he didn't. He said maybe I'd call the FBI, but then again, who calls the FBI? So he basically contradicted himself. That's not a surprise. He contradicts himself all the time. And then made fun of the idea of calling the FBI. And also said, well, it's not like they have the agents to deal with it anyway. They don't have enough agents. Oh, well, gee, I wonder who is in charge of funding the FBI. Right now, that would be the Republicans that are in power. So maybe you could say, hey, maybe we need more agents. So just in case people get campaign contributions from Norway, which would be interesting, then we can maybe do something about it so we could prevent more further interference in our elections. Which, by the way, Mitch McConnell is blocking every measure passed that would prevent the interference of elections. So just think about that. Let that kind of sink in for a minute. Now, Santorum also said of this, quote, he has sort of, as we all do, filler words that don't mean what they say, like, I think. Don't believe your lying ears. No. You didn't hear what he actually said because those were just filler words. Hey, hilarious. That is a ridiculous defense. Now, he wants to talk about solicitation, right? Okay, well, let's talk about a specific instance of solicitation, right? Because he said, well, look, it's not like Donald Trump was saying he was out there soliciting help from other countries. Well, maybe not yet. But back in 2016, there's a little bit of example when he asked Russia to help find the emails that Hillary Clinton was missing, the 33,000 emails. Why don't you hack the Democrats to find the emails? Well, that's a little bit of solicitation, right? I'm just saying. Oh, but okay, on this one, he never did say, "Oh, look, I'm not gonna like." He never said, "I'm gonna solicit that information." He said, "Well, if they come to me, then yeah, I'll take that information." Well, that's still a crime. Message received, right? Now other countries know that if they have damaging information about one of Trump's opponents and they want to get on his good side, well, then he'll take it. Now, why would any other country want to give information to Donald Trump to help him win? Well, that would be influence. In order to get some influence, right? Hey, remember when we gave you that information about, for example, Joe Biden, right? So if they ever had any information, okay, well, now we would like something in return. Maybe a better trade deal for us, or maybe just for you to stay out of our business. Do we have a deal? I mean, again, I already helped you, and what we did, kind of illegal because it's a campaign contribution. So if you don't want that getting out, maybe you can help us out. See, that's the problem with taking what amounts to campaign donations from foreign entities. There are reasons that we have laws against that. Now, it's also the problem from taking any sort of campaign donation from any other source. It gives them influence over you. And it ends up undermining actual democracy. And so, look, I really hope we have a discussion about this, about how not only giving opposition research to candidates or whatever from foreign governments leads to corruption, leads to influence from that, person that's giving that campaign contribution in the form of either opposition research or basically a campaign check, perhaps. I hope we can have more of a discussion on the broader impacts of money in politics, or what is considered right now speech. Because this is a discussion that we as a country, we really need to have. It is a practice that basically is amounted to legalized bribery. Now, I'm sure, of course, pundits will continue to ignore that part of the conversation. Anderson Cooper didn't really mention that. And there's a reason why, of course. Because a lot of that money given to candidates by corporations and wealthy donors ends up going into television ads. So it gets funneled through the candidate, and they spend it on TV. That's how these corporations, these telecommunications companies, get so much money off elections. Now, it's for foreign donations, which, again, this is because opposition research is considered a campaign contribution, and under law, you cannot take those campaign contributions from foreign companies or countries as well. Then this is an admission to Trump wanting to commit a crime. The same kind of crime that he and Don Jr. were already investigated for. And that investigation was, of course, blocked and obstructed. But yet here he is admitting that he would absolutely do it. It's completely indefensible. But as usual, there are the sad sycophants that go on television, like Rick Santorum, that are more than happy to try to defend this. Not just Santorum, but also Laura Ingraham and a lot of the people over at Fox News. I got to give rare credit to Brian Kilmeade for saying, no, this is not acceptable. The president needs to clarify his statement, because if you get opposition research from a foreign government, then that gives them influence over you. And for once in his life, Brian Kilmeade is absolutely correct, whereas a lot of the other Fox hosts, or nearly all the other Fox hosts and Republicans, are deeply incorrect and are just supporting corruption. Then again, knowing the state of the Republican Party, are we really all that surprised? Okay. Moving on. So let's get away from that news and get to something a little different. Okay. Now, yesterday, the House Oversight Committee voted to hold Attorney General William Barr and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in contempt for failing to comply with congressional subpoenas. Now, this vote came just hours after President Trump had asserted executive privilege over materials relating to what they called the citizenship question. Now, look, this is, as I've talked before, is a way for the Republican Party to basically reduce representation and resources in certain Latino-heavy areas. So this has nothing to do with the Russia investigation. This has everything to do with, of course, the census coming up in 2020. Now, people who are not citizens, if there is a citizenship question, would not be counted by the census, despite the fact that they are physically there in that area. Now, in case you only think that this might affect undocumented immigrants, and therefore, like, good, they're not citizens, they shouldn't get counted. No, it also affects dreamers, people who will be citizens, people here on work visas, who are here legally, and those who are working towards getting their citizenship, but haven't yet. And also just simply legal residents who are, yes, here legally, but also are not considered citizens of the United States. They are physically here, and in a lot of cases legally here, but according to the census, if they ask this question, would not be counted as being here. It's almost as if that they don't actually exist. Now that, of course, is preposterous, and what is designed to do, the citizenship question, is designed to help Republicans gerrymander their districts. Now, the census happens every 10 years, and the information gathered by the census helps lawmakers draw districts, congressional districts, which, of course, leads to different amounts of representation. So now, if you take away certain citizens and non-citizens, certain people, I should say, away from the count in the census, then these areas would lose a lot of their power, lose a lot of their representation, because these people wouldn't be officially counted, even though they're actually technically there. Okay? Less people in the census in the area, less representation. Now, that, of course, would hurt places like California, Texas, anywhere there's a large Latino or immigrant population. And that's the whole point. So now, that's why critics want to keep the citizenship question off the 2020 census. And that's why Republicans like Donald Trump want the citizenship question on the census, so that they can gain, of course, more power. So now, what congressional Democrats were doing in the House is saying, well, we want the information, we want these documents that basically will show why they want the citizenship question on the census so badly. Which, of course, I'm assuming would have some sort of damaging information, or show that they're trying to illegally put this question on the census for political reasons. Now, after the and of course, William Barr doesn't want to give that information to the House Democrats, and so that led to Trump doing executive privilege, which led, of course, to this vote to hold Barr and Ross in contempt. Now, after that vote, Trump comes in, says this, quote, "Unrelated to Russia, Russia, Russia. Although the radical left doesn't use the name Russia anymore since the issuance of the Mueller report." By the way, the so-called radical left actually was not in favor of what is considered to be Russiagate. That's more of the establishment Democrats. That's more of the centrist Democrats that talked a lot about that. To be fair, and there's a few people that would be considered on the radical left, like me, that did talk about that, and thought that there were certain aspects of that story that were actually really, really important, like, I don't know, the obstruction of justice. But anyway, moving on to that, he continues. He says, House Committee now plays the seldom used contempt card on our great AG and Secretary of Commerce, this time on the census. He said the Democrats are playing a much tougher game than Republicans did when they had the House majority. They're playing much tougher. Hilarious. That's not true at all. He also added, Republicans will remember. You know what's funny about this contempt vote? You had Justin Amash, he's a Republican in Michigan, more of a libertarian, joining the Democrats in voting for contempt. Justin Amash also believes that we should bring impeachment towards Donald Trump. Now, here's a Republican who's actually principled enough to say, this guy definitely has done things warranted of impeachment, and we should actually hold him accountable. Now, I don't agree with a lot with Justin Amash, but it did take some balls to come out and take that position, and also to agree to hold William Barr and Wilbur Ross in contempt. So again, here's Amash reaching across the aisle to start to hold people accountable. Keeps that up, I might actually like him. Okay, anyway. Now, as far as the statement of Republicans playing, or Democrats playing so much tougher than Republicans, I'm sorry, are you living in the same reality? Democrats play patty cakes with the Republicans, while Republicans come with a shotgun. Do you forget all of the investigations that Republicans launched while they were in control of the House during the Obama years? Numerous investigations. Benghazi is one of the big ones. But of course, he either forgot about them or he doesn't care because he lies all the time. Now, Trump in a subsequent tweet said that because of all this, the Democrats are getting no work done on drug pricing, infrastructure, and many other things. You know what the first thing the Democrats in the House did? They passed an anti-corruption bill, which was actually surprisingly strong. Now, what happened with that? You might want to go check the Senate. You might want to talk to Mitch Grim Reaper McConnell. Hey, I didn't come up with that nickname. He came up with it. He said, you should call me the Grim Reaper because any legislation that comes across my desk, I will not take it up. I will effectively kill it. Besides, didn't you say you were going to do something on drug prices? That you were going to lower I'm going to do something on drug prices, and I'm going to lower them significantly. Well, now what have you done? Oh, right. Nothing. Nothing. And you have urged the Republican Party to do absolutely nothing. Now, what about infrastructure? Well, the Republican infrastructure plan is a complete joke. Unless you love toll roads, which this plan is full of, then you're not going to like the Republican infrastructure plan, which basically consists of selling off our public roadways to multinational corporations who, of course, are under a legal obligation to maximize profit, which means if you let these corporations own the roads, they're going to make a profit from you by putting up toll booths everywhere. I mean, they'll love that, but I'm pretty sure you won't. I know I won't. So the whole thing, of course, more and more projection. Now, the reality is, of course, the House is trying to do their part in holding this incredibly corrupt administration accountable. And Trump, along with his lackeys, hate them for it. And that's the unfortunate truth. Okay. We're going to come back. We're going to do, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll do the Bernie Sanders story, and we might get to the migrant children being detained. So, serious stories. We'll come back in a minute, and we'll do just that. Around the Nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so a couple of comments here from you guys. Sarge Tech says, Democrats with a backbone. Nah. LL with more serious comments says, I'm so tired of this whole thing. I feel like giving up. I have such bad anxiety and trouble sleeping. I'm so sorry. Look, see, that's the one thing that you can't do is give up. Now, I'm not saying don't take personal time. I think that's actually a really good idea because self-care is really, really important. So if you need to, take some time out away from the politics, away from the bad news, because I tend to do a lot of bad news, talk about that a lot, and try to do some mental self-care. It does wonders. And then, when you feel better, come back and we will continue the fight. Because that's the only way we're going to win. Zach Sherman asks, have you seen the video of Trump saying Obama would get us into a war with Iran? Obviously, he knows how it works. I did not see the video, but it goes back to the tweets saying that he would try to get us into a war with Iran. And guess what the Trump administration is trying to do with John Bolton? Trying to get us into a war with Iran. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, I think, because that's also super dangerous, also super important. Okay. That said, Let's do this story real quick. I do not have a sidebar for it ready, but we'll just kind of dive into it. Okay. Now, they say it's pretty important to know the history so that you are less likely to repeat it. Well, in this case, we do know the history, and still we are planning to repeat it, or at least the Trump administration is attempting to. Now, it's just been reported that the administration is planning to hold more than 1,000 immigrant children at a certain Oklahoma Army base. Now, this is according to Time magazine. Fort Sill has been selected to detain about 1,400 migrant children until they can be given to an adult relative. And who knows when or if that would be, because the Trump administration has a pretty bad habit of then arresting those adult relatives and detaining them as well if they are found to be undocumented. Now, this, of course, is Trump's zero tolerance policy in detaining migrants to cross the border. Now, the problem, of course, is with detaining migrants, aside from the moral issue and how wrong it is that you also have to have places to put them. So, look, we get all this talk about the the crisis in the border, right? From the Republicans. There's a crisis at the border. We need to do something about it. We need to. That's why we need to build a wall. The crisis at the border is man-made. The whole fact that we have so many undocumented immigrants that are being detained on the border and have no places to put them, that's why you see children in cages, etc., and also relating to this story, where they're planning to put these 1,400 kids, that was a man-made issue. Now, the thing is, right, the Trump administration is taking a page out of one of the most shameful times in the U.S. history and housing these children at an internment camp that was used to house Japanese people in World War II. Now, this is Fort Sill, as I said, that is located southwest of Oklahoma City. And it was one of several internment camps that Japanese Americans were held during World War II. Now, according to Time, between 1942 and 1946, the U.S. government forcibly removed an estimated 120,000 men, women, and children from their homes and incarcerated them across the country. Fort Sill was one of those places and was later on used to hold German prisoners of war. So not a great place to house children. Now, to be fair, detaining immigrants at these sites did not begin with Donald Trump. In fact, in 2014, the Obama administration held about 7,700 migrant children on bases in Texas, California, and Oklahoma, which included Fort Sill. Now, the temporary shelters were shuttered after 4 months. Under Obama, Fort Sill was used to detain about 200 children. No, that's wrong. And look, were people outraged under Obama? I think some of them were, although a lot of us didn't actually know that this was going on at the time. Now, there are other reasons to be mad at Barack Obama as well for things that he did, because he was the deporter-in-chief, mostly. And yes, that should be absolutely called out. As should the Trump administration for doing what they're doing in creating this crisis. We don't actually have to detain those children. It's not a requirement by law, especially in prison-like conditions that have even led to some of the deaths of some of these migrant children. Now, I'm not saying this is an easy situation to deal with, but maybe we shouldn't do it maybe we shouldn't make it worse by having zero tolerance policies like this, because it will lead to detaining children in prison-like conditions. And what has this led to? Well, the numbers are staggering. The Trump administration this year alone has detained 40,000 children. That's just children. Now, that's a 57% increase from last year, which is a rate on pace to surpass the record figures in 2016, when 59,171 minors had been taken into custody. So what do we do? Well, maybe instead of incarcerating children at these places where we had previously incarcerated Japanese Americans, how about we look at the causes of the surge in migration? Maybe look at the 2009 U.S.-backed coup in Honduras. How'd that turn out? Maybe we should look at that and maybe not do that kind of stuff again. Maybe we should also look at the rampant poverty, corruption, and violence in El Salvador and Guatemala. Maybe we should look at that. That stuff was partly created by the U.S. war on drugs. You also had corporate exploitation into the South. And of course, for some reason, we have a tendency as the United States to basically step on any left-wing government that pops up in South America or Central America. Maybe we should stop doing that. I mean, look, we can't fix all their problems, of course, but maybe we can stop contributing to them and creating those problems. That alone would help reduce the levels of migration. But instead of doing that, we're just going to react by barring people from entry illegally, throwing kids in cages, and setting up what will, of course, later on be considered another dark time in American history. We can do better. Okay. One more. Nope. Here we go. Now, Democratic candidate Bernie Sanders took aim at Jamie Dimon after the J.P. Morgan Chase CEO criticized socialism at an appearance on Wednesday. Now, this is when he was addressing a business roundtable event in Washington, D.C. Dimon denounced the idea of the government owning and controlling companies, saying that they would be used for political reasons instead of economics. He said the scenario over time would lead to, quote, huge deterioration, adding that the whole notion that that's somehow going to be the course for America is a huge mistake. So now, Jamie Dimon is doing something interesting. He is actually using socialism in the correct context and using the correct definition of socialism. Wow, he's like the first one that actually can correctly define socialism as owning the means of production. Got to give him credit for that. Now, where I take credit away is that he is incorrectly attributing that to Bernie Sanders. That is not what Bernie Sanders is calling to do. What Bernie Sanders wants and what he called for and explained during his entire speech about democratic socialism is that he wants a capitalist system, but where we actually take care of people with things like Medicare for all, free college, a living wage, things like that. Social democracy along the lines of FDR and the New Deal. I know the labels get confusing, right? In fact, here's what Bernie Sanders said afterwards. He says, quote, and I love this, I didn't hear Jamie Dimon criticizing socialism when Wall Street begged for the largest federal bailout in American history. Some $700 billion from the Treasury and even more from the Fed. Damn. I love that. Now, this, of course, is an example of what Bernie Sanders correctly called corporate socialism. Now, what is corporate socialism? It's basically where public money gets shoveled towards big companies who don't need it, and in the case of J.P. Morgan, don't actually deserve it. And why do I say that? If you had a hand in creating the financial mess of 2008, well, then you didn't earn that money. Maybe you should not be in business. You know, kind of let the free market take care of things. You guys always want to talk about the free market, but when you mess up, which is what these big banks did in doing, you know, their terrible securities and basically what amounted to mortgage fraud, right? Then if you mess up the economy doing that stuff, then you should not be in business. You should be allowed to fail, right? But when that happens, instead of failing in a system where you have corporate socialism, then they go and they beg the government to get that. And in the case of 2008, they did get that. And not only is it, you know, in the form of bailouts, but you also have subsidies. Right now, we give oil companies subsidies to the tunes of billions of dollars. Why are we doing that? Why are we giving the most profitable corporations on earth a subsidy? And that makes no sense unless you look at the framing of corporate socialism, which is what we are living in right now. This is the system that is happening at this very moment. Corporate socialism. And it's defined as anything that helps corporations and the wealthy instead of helping regular working people. That is not the definition that Bernie Sanders, what Jamie Dimon ascribed, right, to Bernie Sanders is not what Bernie Sanders wants. It is not what Bernie Sanders called for. But corporate socialism, however, is exactly what Jamie Dimon had called for. And so, look, that's why I love it how Bernie fights back, right? I like that he defined what he calls democratic socialism, because when you let the center and the right wing define it, they're always going to compare it to communism. When in reality, Bernie Sanders is nothing more than a New Deal Democrat who wants to finish what FDR started. And that's, of course, bringing justice to regular working people. Economic justice. Okay. That's all I got. Thank you guys for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Please consider becoming a patron or signing up to be a channel member. That helps independent progressive media. There is no corporate money in this show, that's for sure. And we are definitely not getting any sort of corporate socialism. All right. Thank you guys for joining. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.